Well, hey there, folks. Welcome to The Roundup. We're a Cowboy State daily podcast, and our focus is on interesting people in the Cowboy State. And we've had so many wonderful guests over the past over a year now who their interests are history or Wyoming cowboy or just so many different aspects of life here in the Cowboy State. And our guest today, he pulls them all together. He is Gene Bryan, and Gene was for years the head of the Wyoming Tourism Office. He has been involved in Cheyenne Frontier Days and was the head of Frontier Days for many years. He has had his fingers in all of those pies and knows all of the characters. And so I am so proud to call Gene my friend. Hello, Gene. We're so glad to have you on the Roundup today.
Well, Wendy, it's my pleasure to be here. I'm not sure how interesting I am, but it's good to be with you.
This is the problem. Every time I would ask Gene to be a guest on the round, he said, "Oh, I'm not that interesting." Let me tell you, folks, Gene has had such an interesting career. I mean, Gene, you were the head of the tourism office when the 1988 fires in Yellowstone were going on.
Yeah.
You've been instrumental in getting the Wyoming, the rodeo team, the team Wyoming.
In Wyoming.
You
Mhm.
have just had so many amazing interests, and I first met Gene when he was the chamber director in Cody,
Right.
and that was back in the early 2000s. Gene, you have lived all over the state. You've known people in all parts of the state. We're so glad to have you here with us today.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure.
Gene, you are a Wyoming native, and not everybody that we talk to
Right.
has that ability to say that. Tell us about growing up Wyoming, the Casper, Wyoming, and Cheyenne, Wyoming of your youth.
Well, born in Casper, my dad was in the trucking business, and so we lived in Casper and Wheatland, and ended up in Cheyenne, and went to went through the fifth grade in Cheyenne, and then my dad got the wild hair that he was going to set the world on fire up in Idaho, so we moved to Pocatello, and I ended up in three schools that year in the sixth grade,
Oh, wow.
Pocatello, Burley, and then back to Casper. And then a tragedy hit our family. We lost an uncle in a tank explosion in 1953, and so that brought us back to Cheyenne. And so I went through junior high and one of the last graduates of Cheyenne High School when it was still a single high school. So then on to the University of Wyoming, where majored in journalism. And the last 2 years, well, first off, one of the things I was proud of is I was Bill Young's first assistant as in the sports information office at the university. And then the last 2 years I was there, I was sports editor of the Boomerang. So I was going to school full time and working 50 plus hours at the Boomerang and thinking I had the world by the tail. So it was a fun time.
At that age, you probably did have the world by the tail.
Yeah, it was just what you did. I
That's
mean, it
what
was
you
no big
did.
deal.
Yeah. Oh
Right.
my gosh. So I love the fact that you've got this journalism background and that was your love. At what point, I mean, and you took that journalism background and you took those skills and you left Laramie and went on to do some other journalism work. Tell us about
Well,
leaving the state and coming back.
yeah. Spent 2 years with Uncle, military intelligence, the oxymoron division, as George Carlin was fond of saying.
Wow.
Got to spend time in Georgia and then up in Baltimore and then stationed for a year and a half in the Seattle area. Went to work for the Portland Oregonian, right out of the Army, and they had just come out of a 5 year strike to defeat the newspaper guild. So when I went down there, I was low man on the totem pole. I was, but it was a good experience for the brief time I was there. One day I was sitting on the city desk answering the phone, and I pick it up and say, Portland, Oregonian. And Gene, Russ Albaugh, what are you calling me about? Russ Albaugh was the publisher of the Boomerang. He said, I need a managing editor. And I didn't say it to him, but I thought, would tomorrow be too soon? So anyway, Sharon, my first wife, and I picked up and we moved back to Laramie, and we spent several years as the managing editor of the Boomerang, and then uh, I had worked with Tony Bevanetto. Tony had been the classified advertising manager, and then he had gone on and joined the Frank Norris team at the Wyoming Travel Commission. And in 1967, the legislature authorized a fourth professional position. And Tony called me one day and said, "Are you going to apply for this job?" And I said, "Yeah, I saw it come across." I said, I don't think I qualify." He said, "You will qualify. You will apply for this job." So I did, went over, interviewed, and ended up getting the job and spent the next 7 years as news and information director, and then ultimately as the assistant director to Frank Norris when Tony left to go with the Park Service. So then my brother and I got the wild hair that we could be an advertising agency. So we left the Travel Commission for the first time and started up an ad agency that lasted about 10 years. And one of our first clients was Cheyenne Frontier Days. And so that's about 1967.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's when I went back to the state, about 1987.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Dwayne Von Krosik was the general chairman of Frontier Days, and he had decided that it was time for a change at the executive director position. And so he asked me to come out and be the executive director. And so I visited with my brother Mike and wife Sharon about leaving the agency and going to work for Frontier Days. And my brother said it best. He said, "You would hate yourself forever if you didn't do that." So he said, "Goeth for it." And
Had
so
you
that's,
had you already developed a love for rodeo at this point?
oh yeah. I mean, when you grow up in Cheyenne, you either love it or hate it. There's this very little in between. But yeah, I had loved it as a kid. I mean, I go back to the days when they used to have the old potato races out on the track, and kids rode calves, and we had the chuck wagon races, and yeah, it was part of your DNA if you loved rodeo. And so it was a natural. And then my dad was on the committee. He
Okay.
was night show chairman one year, and then he was appointed the Indians Committee chairman, and then they had to move to Casper for the trucking business, so he had to resign. So he only spent 1 year. So I had a connection to Frontier Days.
Okay. So you have been now at the Boomerang, you've been at the Wyoming Office of Tourism, which was still called the Wyoming Tourism
Wyoming Travel Commission.
Travel Commission at that
Right,
point.
right.
So then you said, you know what, I'm going to take a leap. I'm going to go ahead and go to Frontier Days, and I'm going to hitch myself to their
There
wagon.
you go.
And how long? What was your position there? You were the executive
I was the
director?
executive director and
Wow.
did all of the marketing. I brought that with me from the agency and did all of that. Did a lot of typesetting and the whole bit. I mean, it was fun. It was a lot of work, but it was fun. And then in about uh, 1984, the PRCA votes to move the National Finals Rodeo from Oklahoma City after a very successful 20-year run to Las Vegas. And I
Aha.
was I was approached by one of the members of the Winston Rodeo team. They were the major sponsor about becoming the general manager of promotion for the national finals in Las Vegas when it moved.
No way.
And so I again had to make a decision, and it was to leave something I loved, Cheyenne Frontier Days, but move to that next level of rodeo marketing. And so in on April 1st, April Fool's Day, I don't know if that's appropriate, I started work with Las Vegas Events in 1985 and spent the first 3 years with the National Finals Rodeo in Las Vegas. And I think that really is one of the exciting things for me is that when we got there, Las Vegas had no clue what they had. They just knew they wanted it. And about performance two or three, it suddenly dawned on them that they had a tiger by the tail. And to see where it has come from where it was when it first got there to where it is now. I mean, that is a monumental success story. And to have been in on the ground floor of that was a
Exactly.
real plus.
That's exactly what I was going to say. The fact that you were on the ground floor of the NFR in Las Vegas when it first moved to Las Vegas.
Yes.
That was a huge feather in your cap. My goodness.
Well, it was, and I look back on that very fondly. On the other hand, I finally ran into somebody that I couldn't work for,
Oh,
and it wasn't. I think it was a situation where dementia began had taken hold, and nobody really recognized it. But I knew that I had to get out of there,
it was
or
just a
it was just
toxic.
time to leave, and I had no clue where I was going. But just before we moved our office from our regular Las Vegas event office over to the Thomas and Mack, I get a call from Paul Smith, who was chairman of the Wyoming Travel Commission. He said, "Would you be willing to come back and talk to the board about becoming the director of the Travel Commission because Randy Wagner has just resigned?"
Oh
And
my
I said,
goodness.
oh my goodness, Paul." I said, "Here's the situation." He says, "Okay, well, what about this? I'll FedEx you a ticket. You fly out here on Saturday. We'll meet with the governor on Sunday morning. You meet with the board Sunday night, fly back Sunday night to Las Vegas, and you start work on Monday morning." And I said, "Well, if we can make all of that happen, I'll do it." So I did.
Wow.
And met with the Governor Mike Sullivan, who was a personal friend as well as a fraternity brother, and then met with the board that afternoon. And I'm sitting up there at the airport getting ready to head back, and somebody slips in beside me, and it was Paul. He said, "We want you to be the director of the Travel Commission." And I said, "Well, I need to visit with Sharon, my wife." And but I said, "Right now, tentatively, yes." So,
Sharon said yes.
well, she knew I wanted it. She
Yeah.
did not come back with me, unfortunately.
Ah, okay. All
Um,
right.
but I came back in January of 1988, and it was my first chore was to go in front of the Appropriations Committee and defend the budget that I had no clue about.
Somebody else had created.
Yes.
Oh
We
my.
got through that all right because the legislature, literally from the days of Frank Norris, the legislature has always been very kind to the Travel Commission. And they recognized the value that the Travel Commission brought to the table and the tourism industry brought to the table. It was never going to be the number one industry. That's just not in an energy state like Wyoming. That's not going to happen. But it's always very stable, and it's a heck of a number two industry in the state. And you don't have to educate the tourist kids. You don't have to care for them on welfare. They spend their money and they go home. So it's that kind of an industry. So,
How long did you stay there at the Wyoming Travel Commission?
well, the first time I stayed 7 years,
Right.
left, came back, and I was, like I say, got there in January. And then, of course, in June, that was the June of 88.
Oh my.
Be a very good reminder to anybody in the state. It was the years of the fires.
Hmm.
And I would say probably, and I'm not avoiding your question, I'll get back to it.
Oh no, that's good.
Um, the effort we put forth on the fires of 88, probably the thing that I'm the proudest of in my stint with the state of Wyoming. Um, the legislature again stepped up, gave us an extra appropriation because they knew we had a major challenge on our hands because Yellowstone was the lead story in every major newspaper, on every television network, not just in the United States, but worldwide.
Absolutely.
And so we knew we had a heck of a challenge ahead of us. And we put together a public private partnership, the likes of which has never been seen before. Even the Park Service, who doesn't do marketing, they gave us money to help tell the story. We got private sector money, we got public money. All three states stepped up: Wyoming, Montana, Idaho. We really worked hard to overcome the perception that not only Yellowstone, but all of Wyoming had burned up. And
Ab- yes.
it was, we did a trip to, under the old USTS, United States Travel Service. We did a trip to Europe to talk to the travel directing agencies over there about the importance of Yellowstone, the fact that it was still there. So obviously, when 1989 came, we were all very nervous. We had no clue what to
Sure.
expect.
What
And
did you end up with in 1989 then?
set all kinds of records,
Oh my gosh.
and they've just been going ever since. The interesting thing is, we figured it would all be the three surrounding states coming in out of curiosity to see what was going on. The number one state was California. Number two was Germany.
Really? So your trip overseas really did
It
make a
paid off.
difference.
Yeah, well, that and the fact that John Olson, who was then director of marketing and sales for, I think they were called TW Services, now Xanterra.
Hmm.
They were heavily involved in the international market. The Blairs and Cody were heavily involved in the international market, and that all helped. And
You had
so,
partners. You had
yeah, oh,
partners.
absolutely.
It wasn't just your office.
Oh,
Tell
no.
Tell me about that. I mean, because that's one of the things that's just so wonderful and unique about Wyoming is the partnerships that these agencies like the tourism agency based in Cheyenne, but the daily communication the constant communication that's happening between the Wyoming Office of Tourism and all of these tourism and travel agencies, travel commissions
Right.
and boards around the state. Tell us about that
Well, the
from when you were there.
key to that, of course, was Park County Travel Council because they were heavily involved. Rick Wilder was the chamber director at the time. Claudia Wade was the head of the Park County Travel Council. They were key members of that team we put together. And as a result of the Blairs being involved, they brought Tauk tours into the equation. And of course, TW Services, John and his crazy wild assistant, Rick Honinghausen. That's where we first met, and we've been friends ever since. But again, National Park Service, the three states. So it was just a great public-private partnership, and we got the story told.
Yes, you did. You got the story told. And like you say, numbers have been going up ever since
Yeah,
1989. It
it's just been
skyrocketed.
amazing to see what's happened, even with we've had other fires
Hmm.
and floods.
Yes,
The Mother Nature has her way at times,
it's
but
Yellowstone.
it was that year really taught us all a good lesson on how to deal with natural disasters and not to panic. One of the other fun things we did a year after the fires, our agency at the time suggested doing a satellite media tour. And so I went up to Yellowstone in July, and I sat outside Old Faithful Inn on a stool and did 46 live interviews starting at 6 in the morning till 6 at night, and went from the East Coast to the West Coast. And it was fun, but it was, excuse me, I get choked up thinking about it. Um, I
And
had
that was in 1989.
that was in '89, and we finished that, and the guy that was doing the satellite came out of the truck and he said, "Where did you do your TV training?" And I said, "I've never been in TV." He said, "Yeah, you had to have been." I said, "No, I didn't." I
It
said, "I was a
was,
newspaper guy." He said, "Well, you had training somewhere." And I said, "Well, it had to be my speech teacher in high school." And he
I,
said,
that's awesome.
"Have you told her that?" And I said, "No, I haven't, but I can guarantee you I will when I get home."
And did
And I
you?
did. And Callie Milstead was her name, and she treasured that letter to the day she died. So uh, it was um, that was quite the experience. And then we did another one 10 years later with John Varley, who was the naturalist and who had been vilified by the media and the politicians. And everything John said would happen happened. And so the two of us got to tell the story again a decade later. And of course, the recovery at that time was fully underway. So,
That is so great. I love that. And that in my heart and the speech teacher, that is, I credit so much of my career and
yeah.
my abilities and skills to forensics in high school.
Yep. There you
Absolutely.
go. Absolutely.
Yes. That
Yep.
is so great. Now, how long were you there for this stint? So you started in
Okay.
so this was 1988, obviously.
Right.
And
And
so
then,
you
of
stayed
course,
there for how
90,
long?
we had the centennial.
Right.
And so
Oh, that was a banner year.
we celebrated the centennial in 90. And that was when uh, the Travel, Recreation, and Wildlife Committee was headed up by, oh boy, I just lost her name. I didn't think I'd ever forget it. Ah, she was from Cody. Uh, I'm sorry.
That's
Anyway,
okay.
uh, Governor Sullivan and the Centennial Commission hired the fourth and last Centennial director, and her name was Jeannie Rapp. And we were thrown together in these legislative meetings, and the legislature, in its infinite wisdom, had given the Centennial Commission all kinds of program money to do lasting legacy projects all over the state, and they did a marvelous job. But they didn't give them any marketing money. So it
Aha.
fell to the Travel Commission to do the marketing for the Centennial. So that brought Jeannie and myself together. And the last lasting legacy project was the two of us getting married in Paul Smith's backyard on October 6th. So yeah,
That just makes me so happy, and it genuinely brings me to tear. I'm for those of us who knew Jeannie,
yep,
she was a bright spot in any room that she walked in.
yeah,
And
she lit up a room.
she did. And her loss is so recent, Jean, and
Yep,
that's really hard. You guys had what, 34 years together?
34 plus. Yep, 34 plus. So
Which
they
is
they were 34 marvelous years.
yes, you guys just you were a team, the Gene and Jeannie Bryan team.
Yep.
Couldn't have one without the other.
But anyway, we got through that, and then in boy, what year was it? I can't even remember what it was. Anyway, uh, Howard Robinson, I think was his last name, came in as the speaker for Bill Schilling's annual meeting in Casper, the Wyoming Business Alliance. At that time, it was, I think, still called the Heritage Society. And Howard came up from Atlanta, and he was the keynote speaker, but then he was also the wrap-up speaker 2 days later. And his last speech, he slapped that entire audience right up alongside the face and said, Wyoming, you're not ready for economic development.
Oh my goodness.
And then left the stage. Everybody was just sitting there stunned, including the governor. Well, Schilling picked up on that, and he quickly got in touch with the governor and said that he would put together a group to meet at the ranch at Ucross if the governor and others would come up. At that time, I was then Department of Commerce director. I had moved over when
Oh,
Les Colgan left.
okay. So you stayed. What year was this? Do you figure?
Oh, wow. It had to be about 1980. No, not 80, 90, 94,
Okay.
95.
So you stayed at the Travel Commission then for about 7 years, or
Right.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you got the call to go over to Commerce.
Commerce. And
Okay.
I was the public sector member on the steering committee that ultimately wrote the business plan for the Wyoming Business Council.
Wow.
And
Once
Ted
again,
Blair,
once again, ground floor.
yeah, once again, ground floor. And Ted Blair and I basically represented the tourism industry on that. And we both agreed that, we'd been calling tourism economic development since Frank's days. And if we were going to pull the plug then, that was going to be, okay, you talking out of both sides of your mouth here, guys. And we decided that it should be part of the business council, and it it still is, although it's got its own separate board again.
Okay.
And thanks to Governor Dave Friedenthal, and again, ground floor. I was on that first uh, reinstated Wyoming Tourism Board, along with Paul Smith, Pat
Mm.
Sweeney, and a whole group of great guys. Clay James from Grand Teton Lodge Company, and Clay Miller from Paradise Ranch, Matt Driscoll, God love him, from KOA up in Devil's Tower country. So great group, and so we that was my story with the business council. I had a couple of roles with the business council. Um, and in retrospect, I've told everybody this that would listen. If I had it to do over again, I should have left when the business council started up officially after the legislature had approved it.
Why is that?
Well, I was kind of I didn't know what to do, and they
Ah,
put me in as a chief operating officer, and that was not me. And then when John Reardon came in as the uh, CEO, chief executive officer, he and Bill Gentle, who was then the travel director, got crosswise, and Reardon came to me and said, "Would you go back to travel?" So I did that for uh, about 6 months, and then he and I got crosswise, and that's a long story. But
yeah.
anyway, I resigned slash retired, and became a consultant. And as Randy Wagner would say, "Oh, you were unemployed too, right?" So,
But your journey, I mean, your professional journey to this point has been just so full of firsts for Wyoming, for rodeo, for all of these things. And yet you weren't done yet because then you came and made your mark in Cody.
yeah, uh, I was working for Paul. I was his vice president of sales and marketing out at the hitching post, and really enjoying that job. Um, that's where I was when Dave Friedenthal cornered me. He was getting ready to run for governor, and he cornered me out, not cornered me, he found me in the hallway, and we stood there for a solid hour talking about whether the travel commission should have its own separate board and whatnot. And so when he got elected governor, he made it happen. And uh, so I was doing that. I was working with Team Wyoming when Diane Schober and Chuck Kuhn put that program together. And I administered that program for a couple of years, and emceed the breakfast for about 10.
And
Which
you're
was
talking about the Wyoming breakfast at the NFR.
at the one, yeah, at the NFR. That was a love job. I really enjoyed doing that.
So you got to
Um,
go to the NFR and be there, represent
yep,
Wyoming, but then they've got for people who don't know, they've got a day set aside during the National Finals Rodeo where the all the people there from Wyoming just gather and have breakfast
yep.
and network and say hi.
Honor those that have qualified for the NFR, and it's been a great program. And one of the things that's come out of that is a good relationship between tourism and the ag industry, and that's not always been the case. I mean, there's
Of
been some
course.
some headbutting on many issues, but on this one they have total agreement
That's
that
fantastic.
being able to honor those cowboys and cowgirls and stock has been a very, very positive program for the state of Wyoming, I think.
Gene, one of the things when we were all having just a wonderful conversation when we went to visit you the other day, and you and Dan Miller were talking about rodeo, and it was just so fun to listen to the two of you talk about these things because, of course, Dan's role in the rodeo world has been Mesquite Rodeo and all of the national finals
Yeah.
tonight down there in Las Vegas, but the two of you were talking about how the rodeo stock is so much, their personalities are just as much a part of what makes a rodeo performance grand.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Those horses and bulls and I mean they are so valuable to and I know there's a lot of issue about animal rights and so forth, but if people would take the time to see what how those stock contractors take care of those that bucking stock and all of that stock, they would have a greater appreciation for. I mean, those are valuable animals. I mean, Dan can tell you, people will pay $250,000 for a roping horse,
Yeah.
and it could die of colic tomorrow. You know,
It's a
so
gamble. It's a gamble.
yeah.
But that's one of the things, and when you guys were talking about how that's something that you really want people to understand, and you wish more people knew, is that this rodeo sport, it's a combination. You can celebrate the cowboys, but you have to celebrate the stock as well.
Oh, absolutely. And the cowboys and the cowgirls would be the very first to tell you that if they didn't have quality animals, they wouldn't have any opportunity to win. And I think that's one of the developments of rodeo today, going to these uh, tournament style formats for the larger rodeos. It wouldn't work on the 2 or 3 day rodeos. It just not long enough. But the San Antonios, the Houstons, Calgary, Cheyenne can go to these tournament style, and that allows the stock contractors to subcontract with their other contractors and bring in their best stock for a short period of time. And those cowboys and cowgirls are getting the opportunity to compete against the very best stock that's out there. And so it has really ramped up the whole rodeo scene, and the money's getting there. I mean, thanks to Las Vegas and the money that they're putting into the national finals now, it's never going to match anything to do with professional golf or the NBA or any of that. And the Cowboys and Cowgirls, I don't think would want to go there. Um, that's one of the neat things that I've always loved about rodeo. It's a pay to play. You pay for the opportunity to compete.
Absolutely.
And
There's very few people that make money
yeah,
off of rodeo.
and they're helping each other. You'll see Brody Kress ride a saddle bronc, and the next thing you know, he's back there helping Damian Brendan get on his horse to try to outride him. Or the steer wrestlers will get off of their horse, change the stirrups, and the guy will get on that same horse and go down or he'll go over on the other side and haze for him too, and they're competing against the animal, not against each other.
It's a community. It's a
It's a
community
community,
very much
and
so.
it's a family. They support each other, they police each other. I've seen that happen. And if something happens, they're the first there to help. And the one funny thing that happened my first year in Las Vegas, the bull riders stayed down at the Four Queens Hotel. And after the rodeo, we made a visit to all of the host hotels to see how it had gone for them during the week. And Cherry Trotter was the little gal that was sales director down there. And she said, Gene, we'll take those bull riders every year. She said, I have never been mammed so much in my life.
That is so
They are
great.
so polite
Mhm.
and appreciative of everything that we did. And uh, and I don't think that has changed over can you believe it? It's going to be 40 years this
I,
December that it's all but
that
1 year it's been in Las Vegas, and that was
that's
COVID.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was COVID. Exactly. Isn't that amazing? And
Yeah.
you've been there from the ground floor of this, and it to me is a tribute to the work ethic that you have, to your personality, to your pure love of the sport. Even though you've never been a competitor, you just purely love the sport, and you've been a fantastic advocate for it.
Well, I like to tell people I'm dumb, but I ain't stupid, so I never did compete. I
Of
think
course.
the other thing that I wish there were more attention to is you see what's happened in Las Vegas. National Hockey League, National Football League, Major League Baseball moving there in a couple of years. You know,
Really?
you know the NBA is going to be there before long, and it all started with the NFL or with the NFR
Did it really?
because December was a there was a it was a wipeout month. They closed December, opened December 31st for New Year's Eve. Other than that, December went dark in Las Vegas. And now
Until the NFR came.
it's pretty easily to say that it's probably one of the sports capitals of the United States, maybe even of the world. So
Again,
the NFL started.
ground floor, Gene Bryan. One of the things that just really strikes me is how rodeo has just been a thread throughout your career. And whether
Right.
you were probably reporting on it for the Boomerang, or whether you were, with Cheyenne Frontier Days or with the Las Vegas with the NFR, and then you go back to Cody, you are part of the Team Wyoming promotion while you're in Cody, right? That's happening at the
That's
same
correct.
time.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you came to Cody, which of course, Cody Night Rodeo, the Cody
Stampede.
Stampede. I mean, all of the things Cody is rodeo. We are very proud of that. So coming to Cody had to really be a highlight for you.
Oh, it was. And I think one of the real highlights there is that Stampede committee is very dedicated. I mean, those guys work hard, and I consider a lot of those folks very close friends to this day, even if I don't see them. But one of the real highlights was watching a young guy work out in the arena at the night rodeo, and without question, Dusty Tuckness is the greatest of all time.
Absolutely.
And I've had the opportunity to tell him that, and he's here in Tucson this week. I just gave it up that I'm in Tucson,
That's
uh,
okay.
but I just he's one of the bright shining stars for Wyoming, and uh, and he hasn't forgotten that. I know he splits a lot of time because he's on the road all constantly. He's much in demand, and this guy performed last year. I mean, he fought bulls last year with a broken arm most of the season, and he is without doubt the guy that has made bullfighting in the rodeo arena the athletic event that it is today.
I agree.
So got to see him start in Cody, and it's been fun to watch him develop.
Oh, I agree. Oh my gosh, we're so
Yep,
proud of him in Park County. Gene, when you got done in Cody, that was kind of your official retirement.
yep,
You decided, okay, now we're just going to go have fun. So you and Jeannie went and had fun, which is what brought you to Tucson as well.
correct. Yep. We got in the motorhome and had no clue where we were going to go. We knew we were going to go see my dad for his 92nd birthday. And as it turned out, that was his last event. We were going to spend a month in Las Cruces, New Mexico. We had two criteria: warm and a university. And so
And the
Laramie was out.
university, yes, Laramie is out when you're wanting the warm part. But one of the things that you love about the university, and it goes back to again your love for sports, is you wanted access to those college sports to because you think that for your perspective, from your perspective, that's the pinnacle and the best of sports.
Yes, no question. I love college sports so much more than professional, although college now has become professional. Um, but yeah, and we had access to, we for a time we were season ticket holders of football, men's basketball, women's basketball, baseball, and but one of the real highlights that happened is that we found out that Tucson is really a hotbed for live theater, and so for
Really?
the last 8 years we've been season ticket holders in two live theater performances. So in addition to the sports, we got to really experience the live theater, and it's second to none. I mean, it's every bit as good as Chicago, Seattle, Minneapolis, even Broadway. I mean, they're good.
That is
So,
absolutely
yeah.
fantastic. Gene, this has been such a fun conversation, and I have enjoyed it. I've just enjoyed it thoroughly. Are there things looking back at your life when you look back at the your time in Wyoming, all of those years, is there a time where you really felt, it just doesn't get any better than this? Whether it's your interactions with people, whether it was the team that was around you, whether it was the place that you lived, can you say, I look back at this and this is the shining moment?
Well, there wouldn't be one. I think as we've gone through this litany, I was very blessed to have three of the best jobs any person could ever hope for. When you think about being director of the Wyoming Travel Commission, being a general manager for the National Finals Rodeo in its infancy in Las Vegas, and then frankly being the chamber director in Cody. The neat thing about that job was I wasn't building a resume anymore.
That's true.
I could go in and with the board's support, we could try some stuff. And one of the things that we got done was that we split economic development off from the chamber function. And I don't know the final result. We probably won't know that for another 50 years, but it was worth a try and we got it done. So to have those kinds of jobs and love every minute of it, that would be the highlight. And then the people I got to work with, some really talented, creative people, and only ran into two that I couldn't deal with over
That's
the career. So that's
pretty good
not bad.
that's pretty
Not
good
bad.
batting average right
That's
there.
not bad.
Yes. Well,
Right.
Gene, I am so pleased that our paths crossed 20 plus years ago.
Me too.
And it has just been a joy to have this conversation with you today and to really live and let those highlights of your life and those moments in your life and those transformations in the world that we know, whether it's rodeo, whether it's tourism, whether it's
Right.
Yellowstone, to be able to talk about those things from your perspective because you had such a unique perspective on all of those things. This has just been a gift.
Well, thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Well, it's been my pleasure too. And folks, I hope it has been your pleasure as well. Because I tell you, when we have people like Gene Bryan, who are from Wyoming, who have lived and dedicated their lives to Wyoming culture, to Wyoming heritage, to all the things that make Wyoming unique, that tells you what a special, special place we are at. And I just can't imagine a better place. And I'm so glad that Gene Bryan, you have made your mark on this state.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Well, it's ours as well. Folks, thank you for tuning in today. Thanks for being a part of our conversation with Gene Bryan. Don't forget, you can either watch share this conversation with anybody that you know who might find all of these topics very interesting. And of course, if you have an idea for other fascinating people to have on the Roundup as my guest is on the Roundup, I would sure love to hear from you about that. But until next week, have a wonderful week, folks. Don't forget to tune in. We'll talk to you soon.